Okay, so we had talked, I'll lead and I'll hand it off to you, Meg. So we had asked, and suggested a facilities committee meeting. It actually, for a couple different reasonings that kind of fold into. One, main reason is we have the, federal funding that has come through, of which we have the ability to touch, facility improvements, especially in the area of ventilation or structural. So we want to have a discussion about that. And we also have out there that we have discussed the need to do the Townsend floors. So the timing of that, so for tonight, we good night to discuss that, kind of solidify our decision-making and direction as far as timing goes of that process. So with that, Meg, I'll turn it over to you to.
So when we were brainstorming how to use these funds, a number of different capital projects came up. There are a few things that we still have in the plan, such as HVAC-related things that are on our radar. Like we know we have 9 unit vents that need to be replaced. We have some HVAC controls that are part of the capital project. So if we can, because the roofing is costing more than we originally budgeted because of areas where we were going to not completely tear off, we are now. So if there are some pieces of the capital project that we could pull out and fund with this and still get the whole scope done, we're looking at that. We had put in other things. We had started to look at putting other things in, like the Townsend flooring, the idea of a generator for this campus has been thrown out. But in looking, the state has not, they've been clear that capital projects can be funded with a stimulus fund. What they have not clearly said is whether or not the stimulus funding is somehow coordinated with buildings. And I talked to Questar about these, and they said, while the state has not officially said, they think that if you do a capital project through stimulus funding, you'll be foregoing building. So it's one or the other, you would get both. So Mike and I have talked about this some, and in some ways it seems to make more sense to spend the stimulus funding on other items that normally would have been paid out of the general fund. Free up funds in the general fund that we can use to help fund the local share in a capital project, and do the capital project and get our normal building. So you're just stretching your dollars further that way. So we've sort of shifted our approach to this as far as what we're looking to fund, and thought it makes more sense to make our capital projects continue to be traditional capital projects and work to put aside the local share and use the stimulus funding for some initiatives as well as some regular operational expenses to allow us to continue to fund the capital reserve. Does that make sense so far?
Yep. Just keep stretching it as much as we can get out of the process.
So like Mike said, we know we had on our radar doing the Townsend flooring, and I think the current preferred approach is to do all of the second floor, both the side where it's crumbling and the side that's not yet in as bad shape, but while we're in there to do the whole thing. In order to do that, and fund the local share with zero tax impact, we need about $500,000 in capital reserve. The board just approved up to $500,000 at the end of the year. I'm confident that I'm 99% sure we're going to be able to do that full $500,000. So that would put us in a position to have the funding ready to fund the local share in that project and set aside in the capital reserve. I need to refine my numbers with Christine a little bit. So there might be a small additional amount we could put in, but I'm confident we could do that well before we went to the referendum. But it's going to be really close to the $500,000. So we wanted to talk tonight about other projects or other priorities that we think are on our radar, in addition or after the Townsend flooring. Is the generator a priority? Is that the next thing we want to go to, or are there other items that we want to think about and talk about first?
The only thing from my recollection of conversations in the past regarding the generator is that our energy is not located in one central location coming into this facility. It comes in a couple spots. And we
it comes in one spot, but the problem is it's split off. It would take, you would have to segregate certain areas. You wouldn't be able to do the entire high school, middle school. What you'd want to do is this and the gyms, or the high school gym, cafeteria, kitchen, this area through here, the administration wings.
Okay, so bear with me for just a minute then. If it's coming in one location,
It is.
why couldn't we intersect it where it comes in before it splits? I'm sure it's a three-phase.
Right, what it
Intersect
does,
it right there, put a generator in, then have everything would still be energized.
yeah. What it does is it takes the size of the generator. That's number one. I mean,
Oh, I understand, it'd be huge.
yeah. And what, if you want, like with a 400K generator, you would do the way it was planned out before anyway, is just do the A wing basically.
So basically, we were like an emergency shelter or something.
Right.
You didn't
Right.
have power in
So
the
you
gym,
had
you have power in the kitchen.
Cafeteria, administration wing, auditorium, high school gym, and a few other little things.
But you wanna make sure you have your data racks, like where.
Right. And the size of the generator would be quite cost prohibitive, number one, to do this entire building, the high school and middle school. And there wouldn't be any need really to do B-wing middle school like that. Because all you need is the boiler room, you need to keep the pumps going, and the system, like over in B-wing and in the middle school, fails 100% open anyway to heating, and your pumps would be running, so there'd always be heat going through, so there wouldn't be any type of freeze up at all.
So I guess if we were to go down the road of the concept, that's where we bring in the expertise to do an analysis of the facility. You know, I mean, Bosse's Hero Campus has a facility, has a generator, and it powers all 8 levels of that facility.
Right.
You know, and it's not, when you say huge, it's not in size-wise, this monster, like, you know, I mean, a machine as far as sheer size and of it. So, I mean, the question to me would be, is this something that we would want to have assessed and analyzed? As far as how the power comes in, when it cuts off, what it would take.
So I guess my concern would be, and not understanding the systems here, is I'd hate to focus on just like heat, which is high priority, and then lose our data systems.
Correct.
Or lose our security systems. Yeah, we've got heat, but we can't use our building because that system is powered on that other wing for some reason. I mean, I'm just.
Yeah,
So if we were gonna go down the road of a generator, my suggestion at first would be have somebody come in, look at the system and tell what it is to do all, and then tell us what it is to do priority. I mean, what is it to do kind of a bare bones and do all, and you might be surprised what it costs us.
Yeah.
It might be astronomical, it may not be that when you have to get to your minimal.
Yep. That's what I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's not our area of expertise.
full-blown assessment on the difference between the two would be great. And also, you know, if you have a long-term power failure, you know, could a generator make this place operational and continue school operations potentially?
Mhm.
Is that within reach or not? You know,
Right.
you could get that assessment. So if we're looking at an assessment, I definitely think we would move that recommendation forward to go to that next level and do an assessment to figure out what is really out there and what can we really do. The number one priority I remember from last time going around here was, the next priority was locker rooms.
Mhm.
Our locker rooms in those areas were, the next highest priority, if I remember correctly, looking
Yeah,
back.
they were terrible.
As far as, lockers, full
Shower.
refurbishing.
Yeah, I mean, the shower rooms and stuff like that are all cracked, mildew, I mean, everything's split in there. It's, when we did the walkthrough, no. Let's see if we can do something about
I
that.
know some of the lockers we had swapped out,
Right,
and it wasn't good quality lockers that they swapped into. We had trouble with them for years. Had to modify them with shelves to keep things from being stolen from them and everything else, so.
well, John's crews patched the shower rooms in those high humidity areas for probably 20 years now, you know, and it's to the point where they're cracked. I mean, it's just not
Are there separate locker rooms for the high school?
Yes,
Yes,
And are
each
you
gym has,
talking specifically about?
high school.
we're talking about the high school ones.
Okay.
That's the ones we walked through.
right.
Yeah.
The other ones must be circa the middle school edition, right?
Yeah, and those showers in the room over there, it's relatively new, and they're not really used, are they, John, in middle school?
Especially middle school, that's just very, About the only time they get used is when a visiting sports team will come in, a varsity team, and use the girls.
Yeah.
And our boys' locker room gets used sometimes, the showers.
In the middle school lockers, they've stayed in relatively decent shape, because they don't have the full size, right?
Are any of the studies able to be funded through this? Or is that a hit to our general funds?
Study as far as the
Like this-
professional fees to look at
Right.
the generator, possibly. Possibly, I mean, we wouldn't then be able to put that as part of the project cost building later on, but it would at least get us the information and everything.
But I'm just thinking if we spend monies on this and then opt not to go
Mhm.
in a direction, where are we paying for that? I mean, I'm just, that's trying to keep
Mhm.
cautious before we throw 20 things at the wall and say, well, let's check this, that all comes at a fee. And then, I mean, we're just,
And is one of our goals and priorities to be, you know, shelter ready? Is that a goal of ours or not? Because there may be other things attached to shelter ready that we're just not aware of.
Well,
and I don't know if we'd want the, I don't know, you'd have to
I
do
just-
that, if
we
we
have to-
wanted the term,
Right.
I mean, the label, shelter ready. I don't know, I think there's some other implications
That's
to,
my
to
point.
have that on your door.
We are now, aren't we? We're
Ah.
Red Cross Emergency Shelter now.
I thought after the last flood that this was one of the locations,
Yes,
but,
it is,
yeah, don't we have supplies still downstairs?
yes.
Oh, we are?
Yeah, I believe we were designated as one 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Before that, we were designated that before I left.
Yeah.
We have, the end room downstairs had Red Cross supplies and everything in there that they wanted on site.
so.
So do we still have them supplies, I guess, on site?
I
Yes.
don't believe they've been touched,
I
right?
did not realize that.
Would I,
So, I mean, it's hammock, blankets, things like that,
Yeah.
right?
So is there any, I don't know, I got my brain going 100 mile an hour. Is there any other federal funding for this to be shelter ready, whatever it is, that would help? For example, I mean,
Yeah,
to me, if you're shelter in the winter and we lose our heat, we're not much of a shelter.
Right.
Yeah,
if that happened, Kevin.
No, I mean, and if we're a shelter in the middle of July.
Yep.
Or a hot stretch and we lose our air conditioning, you're still on the same, we're not providing,
well, we had the conversation years ago, but it's probably worth the conversation today, not to predict anything to change. Years ago, they wouldn't even help us with an access point to have a FEMA generator. We went down that road.
Right.
So do we just put in a plug,
Right.
for a hookup for a FEMA generator? If this was a site, and they wouldn't even entertain that, but that was in the middle of, multi-million dollars worth of damage around here in funding.
Right.
Maybe it'll be a different
Yeah,
position
disaster, in
today.
a county like this, I think the term's disaster ready.
Right.
But I think that,
We're thinking, like with a FEMA generator or something like that, you'd have to basically, go to where all the transformers are for middle school and V-wing and everything, you have to shut those down because you would basically stall the generator on startup.
Right. But we had talked about whether they come in and put in a hookup, because they do that at places.
Yeah.
So that, we'll figure out a contact for that. We'll explore that as an option out there.
just trying to get all the money that's out there for whatever.
Yep.
And,
Steve Hood might be a good contact on that, at least to start the initial process and ask questions.
Maybe.
He-
Can't hurt, can't hurt.
He should be able to.
Emergency services, that's
I was
for
gonna say,
sure.
probably point you in the right direction of who to call.
Right.
that was one of the reasons I wanted, the conduit underneath, like a 6-inch conduit to run lines through one way or the other. In case the generator may have to come over into here, or if it goes over there, you want to run your 2-volt wire through underneath. I wanted that done when we were doing the paving, so that we'll never have to tear that up again, hopefully.
Same page, but I was just thinking about that, that this is a study we're gonna have done before we get into
Yeah.
next phase of this, so that we're not,
Yep.
nothing worse than fixing something just so you can dig through it again. And it happens all the time, unfortunately.
Did you make that clear to them? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's all
They know that.
already, Bill was here just the other day, and we talked about that. We actually, scoped out exactly where
for the conduit?
Yes.
Are we in agreement that the items that we just discussed with the generator and the locker rooms are a priority after the floor accounts, and that
Yeah.
the town's floor is our next priority?
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, that's safety and that's a few
Yeah, I think
other
we
things
need to
that-
take care of that then.
Well, and I think as we say priorities, it'd be priorities for us to consider. Because depending on where we end up with the funding, where we end up with the floor, some of these other items can end up in the next consideration of project as well, correct? We're not saying immediate need, but next need.
Right, no, I just,
This is pretty primitive, but I just tried to sort of lay out a timeline here. So what I did here is I just laid out 4 projects. The first one is what we're going into this summer, Townsend flood mitigation and roofing. And then phase 2 is the orange, and then the Townsend floor is the blue, and then our next major capital project would be the green. And what this basically just tells us is that this summer, we'd be doing the roof in Townsend. Next summer, we'd be doing phase 2. The following summer, we'd have no construction. The next summer, we'd be doing Townsend floor. Then we'd have 2 summers with no construction before we got into our next capital project. So this is like rough and just kind of using the timeline that we have for this project to figure out how long we needed for state ed approval and things like that. So this assumes that we vote on the Townsend flooring this coming November, which was the timeline we had, briefly talked about.
The,
And so if we voted, this fall, construction would happen in the summer of 2024, because if you've got a year, you've got quite a bit of design time, and then FED approval, you're a good year in before you go out to bid.
we also, another priority, I believe, should be the Pratty entrance way at Townsend School, where that's crumbling the concrete overhead.
So what entranceway, John?
The Pratty entrance way, the entryway by the flag. Flag entryway, I guess I'd call it.
Yeah, the stone veneers
Yeah, Kevin,
separating.
remember overhead?
Yep.
When we did our board walkthrough 2 years ago, we that was a high priority area because it could develop into a danger at some time of, concrete falling from overhead. And of course, that's right to 35, right underneath one of those rooms. And also the stone on that, those steps right there, and the stack over at Townsend is in need of, a lot of concrete work. Chimney. So if I could go up on that roof right now and probably pick up pieces of concrete that big around.
Is that going to hold until potentially 2027 before we do anything to it?
Hope so.
I honestly didn't think about the archways and that, so I would say that in my mind, those archways and things would jump ahead of the generators
And it should be a
and
relatively
the locker
cheap.
rooms. I would
I
just, as a shifting of the charts, because that is a potential for,
things like the generator and the locker room are really, we're looking at for that 2027 capital project, they would be scoping that. The only thing I can think of is if we wanted to do some of this stuff at Townsend sooner, could that be lumped in with the floor? Like if we could get more money in the capital project to cover the capital reserve to cover the local share of that, could that be done?
I think if you're talking structural stuff, it would probably make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Along with those rooms, I believe, because that would really be tied in somewhat
Tied in,
With
and you
room.
have the contractors there that
Yeah.
are doing the structural and all that.
between, this is right in the area of 219 and 220. I think it's located right in the center, that's in the center wall, that splits those 2 rooms.
So Mike, we had, when we did the capital project vote last year, it was August, I think, when the board did like the secret and things like that, and it's June. Is it reasonable to think that we could get scope and numbers in the next 2 months to try and include that in that? Like,
I
do we have enough time?
I would have to say that, yes, if we make them get it to you that quickly. mean, the scope for that work is pretty straightforward for the entryway.
Right.
I just think it's, and then
Well, and are we
floor's
talking
been
about-
investigated numerous times, so there's not a lot more investigative work to be done on the floor.
Right. Are we talking about a restructure of those walkways, or are we talking about repair work? To
I would
those
say
archways? Huh?
I would say repair.
If we're talking about repair work, is that something that we want to hold for a year and a half in the project, or do we want to try to find a contractor to do repair work? And would that be something that we'd consider as a direct pay out of the federal money and just have it done? If it's $50,000 or less or something of that nature, rather than wait. We're worrying about concrete falling down on somebody's head.
Yeah.
I guess my only thing with it is I'm not sure how far the repair is gonna go.
Right.
So I like the idea of it being a repair and doing it sooner. I'm just saying, when you look into that and actually get really focused on it,
Mhm.
it may become more than just a repair.
And when
It
we
may,
walked,
it may get deeper.
yeah, when we walked through it, they determined they were non-structural, basically decorative, those stone laminate, you know, I mean, on the face of those, that they were basically non-structural is what we were told at the walkthrough. Now, when you get digging in it, is it gonna be or not, that's a different scenario. I've got that, the last one I had was that 2018 report, I was just trying to go through some of the priority ones in that by building, and there's, you know, depending on how big or small you wanna go, there's small things like, you know, auditorium stage and exit lighting, you know, as an $8,000 option. There's other priorities that are, you know, there's a whole gamut of things. High school main entrance security, obviously, we're gonna take care of that now. The locker rooms were on that as priority ones, but I just went through the list and I was starting to pull out just the priority ones in our head, you know. Auditorium seating was one. I think the tiles under those, we were looking at very closely in the auditorium as to what the composition of those were.
They're,
Over here.
Yeah, in the auditorium in here.
they're asbestos tiles.
Yeah, so I mean, in my mind, some of that stuff is pretty important to just have out of the building for once and for all. I know they're in good shape now, but,
Right.
you know, at some point, they are going to be a major priority, and if it's 2027, that's, you know, that's okay too.
Yeah.
But that's where I was starting to pull through some of this list stuff.
You know, and that gets use, the limited use in there, I mean, it's been years since we've even had to do it. They make a 9x9 vinyl composition tile that will replace anything cracked in there. And really, you can walk in there right now, there's nothing in, you know, danger. And we go through there and we scrub it, we wet scrub it, and we seal it with wax every year, so it's.
So I think if we pull the priority ones and just say, is this a hazard, like the veneer arches, and say, you know, something like that's gonna fall on somebody's head, that's the priority one with a potential hazard to it. The seats are a priority one, but there's no real hazard to them, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we could probably sort out and come up with a quick list to propose, you know, and then funding it, you know, whatever the best funding stream is, it is, whether, you know, you guys are gonna know more about that than we are, as far as what the best source of funding.
So basically what you're saying is if we review that list and
Yeah.
there's things that we think we shouldn't wait till 2027,
Right.
we maybe make them a priority, either with the towns and flooring or with federal stimulus funds.
Right.
Correct.
The windows were identified, John, you identified those windows over in the middle school, or over to the B wing, all the frosted windows that are, you know,
Yeah,
lots
going
of
down
gas
through
in them.
the,
That
walkway
breezeway,
down
yep.
through, and then down here going into the seaway.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, we could approach it that way, and just say,
We've got this whole wing down through here.
Yeah, here, yeah, well, right, like a next, I don't know where it's next up, but one of those right there.
Well, all the way down through. All those
Yeah.
window systems are shot. Those were never replaced. B-wing was replaced once.
Yeah, the B wing and the classrooms themselves, we're talking the walkway down past the offices.
Oh, gotcha. The breezeway.
And
I'm
like-
talking about the breezeway.
yep.
Breezeway, that's the word I'm looking for, and then breezeway going into the seaway.
So maybe today we can just set criteria, you know, as far as health and safety, energy efficiency. If it's the windows and it's a money saver for heating and, you know, heat loss type standpoint, you know, maybe that's higher than the generator, but the generator's still on the wish list type deal.
Right.
Maybe we can just sort through it that way, and I mean, we've done all this work on these things, and we've been so focused on them ever since I've been here. So it'd be nice to see some of them come to fruition.
No,
And
absolutely.
it'd give you a good scope too, Meg. I mean, it seems like it's forever out there, 2027, but it's right around the
Guys, it's
corner.
gonna be, I mean, if you think for a 2027 project, if you think that we've got to have our scope pretty much decided by the beginning of 2025,
Yeah,
we're going to be there.
right.
But,
Hey, Nick, on the council floor,
yeah.
was there a reason why you were thinking 2024?
Just thinking, okay, so if we did a public, I just used sort of the timeline that we had for our current project,
Okay.
and obviously this might be able to be shorter, but if we did a vote in November, 6 months or so for design, which it might, obviously with just the floor, I guess it wouldn't take that long, but that's what we had for the current council project. And then just, I think he had 4 months for state ed approval, and then it going out to business spring. So it could potentially,
Yeah, I think
it could potentially shorten depending on what we,
it could be short. The reason why is because the STD review, there's not a lot of mechanical involved in it. Sometimes that's what the holdup is there.
Mhm.
And even if you want third-party review, I know you don't want to spend that money, but I'm just concerned about the flooring and waiting 24 for that structural flooring to be done. And they might be able to get it, because the amount of investigative work that DCA has done so far, they already know what the attack is.
Yeah,
on
it's
that
not really
floor.
a complicated design there.
I know what
It's
you
rip,
do
rip it up,
design-wise.
put the new deck down.
So it's just a
yeah,
thought.
yeah, no, we could certainly swap that out and get that up to the summer of 2023, and then 2024 would be no construction. My only concern is depending on what we potentially add to that scope, it would elaborate, the design would be more complex and things like that, but I can't imagine that we would add enough to make it more complicated than our current project.
Mechanical work would be almost zero on that, because they're all ceiling mounted units up there. So that would be,
There may be some electrical stuff or something like that, there may be
right.
some, but nothing major. So, yeah.
Okay.
So-
This is very helpful.
Where should we go from here as far as getting someone to come, making a determination about those other structural pieces of town, and knowing whether or not we want to add them to the cost and the scope for a fall vote? I mean, that needs to happen over the next 8 weeks. So, is,
Well, the first question, so we have to get up, so we know who our team is with this process. With the timeline and what we're talking about getting this done, at some point here when we finish the project, as part of our process and procedure of the district, we're looking at doing an RFP and determining whether or not our current architect is our continued architect, or if it's a new one. That's what we do with all of our services. And we had said that, so with this being as tight and kind of folded in, are we holding on that concept until after Townsend? Rather than jumping into an RFP right now and processing that? So that's one thing we have, it has nothing to do with organization or not, it has to do with procedure and policy of the district.
How many years out are we with that RFQ, the current one we're operating on?
RFP, it's by project. So right now, I guess architect of record is BCA for the current project. At the end of the project, we can move.
When was the last time
An RFP for architect,
we had the architect, the
we've
architect?
had BCA since the design of the school of the last vote that didn't go through, so it's been a long, long time.
2013, we had Steer Brown, then we moved BCA in 2014.
I mean, our rule of thumb is we're trying to get these on like a I may correct me if I'm wrong, like a 5-year rotation is what we're trying to do. And obviously, if an architectural firm has a project that spans that 5 years, we're not going to disrupt that. That's not how we're gonna operate. But I believe that we want to get that on a rolling with all of them on a 5-year basis.
Yep.
Just as a policy to make sure that
Checks and
we're
balances.
doing diligence.
Correct, and we had talked about that,
Yeah.
and we thought that we were past that timeline.
Right.
So the question is, the Townsend kind of threw a little wrinkle into it, because now we've got a timeline, a tight timeline, sense of urgency, because we've got, we're okay, everything's safe, it's structural, but it's not something we want to prolong. So and some work's already been done by the firm.
So we have a team in place, as far as I understand, that does the architectural review, things like that. We have another company on behalf of us to look at it from our standpoint. Is there any reason to disrupt that team in this current phase?
I would recommend that we get through the Townsend flooring before we make any adjustment.
And then we still have two sets of eyes looking at this from an engineering standpoint.
Yep, yep.
Like, I'm comfortable with that.
I'm just, the timing, that's all. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're following
Yep.
the board's wishes on process.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can come out of facility, and talk about on our next board
Just
meeting.
to clarify it.
Yeah, and just say, hey, is everybody okay with this?
Yep.
We'd like to continue with this team that we have a pretty good team in
We'll,
place right now.
we'll note that under our discussion items from the facility committee.
And then that way, I don't know, Miranda, are you okay with that, Miranda? You think that's a good idea? I think that way we have it all out to the entire board to say, hey, we know we want to do this RFP process again, it's been a long time, we want to review it. But right now, we have time and urgency of the new funds to get through Townsend floor. So let's say, see if they want to keep the team in place to do that.
I think if we're confident in having the team that we have do as big of a project, I think that we should feel confident that having them look at it, like you said, Greg, and reiterating it and not disrupting it, as long as the whole board's in understanding of that. I agree.
And if we're able to do like Mike said, and do the Townsend Floor in 2023, we'll have a few years there with no active construction projects, while we'll be planning.
To be planning, yeah.
Project. I think there's enough planning time there that we could do the review.
And then our next update for our facilities condition should be falling very soon, right? The conditions update?
Building condition survey?
We just did our visual,
That was this year?
and what are we, 22 for the fall, yeah, 22.
I thought it was coming up, so that'll be here too.
I agree with the recommendation of the fact that, well, number one, you own all the work that BCA did on the Townsend floor investigation anyway, so you can get that information handed off. That's a tough position to be in for a new architect. So these guys, I agree with the Townsend part of it, but you're also you're going into a possible building condition survey, and a lot of districts are using that as their opportunity to relook at architects.
Yep.
So that's a discussion that you can have at some time. And some are keeping the architects they have to finish up what they've got going on. And a neighboring district nearby just did that. So they are working with another firm now on their BCA, on their building condition survey. And then the other firm is finishing up their capital project that they're in right now.
Right, clean.
It's a thought process.
Is that listing is from the building condition survey?
Yes.
So that would be updated potentially in 2022, which
Oh,
would be
yeah.
to use that fresh data for planning the
Right.
high priority number one.
Yeah, we'll have to reprioritize everything that's left,
So is the recommendation and the thought that we would want to do the RFP before we do the building condition survey, so that whatever firm was awarded the RFP does that building condition survey?
I think
in 2022?
only my opinion, I think, the building condition survey is the piece you get them to present to you as to how they're going to propose that and run you through that entire process. And I think your selection should be based off that. Because that's the firm that, if you're comfortable with the process they're going to use to do the facilities conditions and go forward with, and then you have that comfort level built into the selection, and you're with them for the next 5 years, for sure. And probably through multiple capital projects with it.
So when we say that we're due for a building condition survey in 2022, does that mean that by December 31st, 2022, you have to have it done?
Correct.
If you're on the list of when yours is done, yes.
And roughly how long does one take?
That would take about a week.
Okay. So basically,
Without the paperwork part, without the report part of it, that would be actual, myself, Rick Robinson, Rick Shaw, and, one person like Scott from BCA.
so basically, we should be planning to do our RFP in the beginning of 2022, so that we have a firm selected to do the building condition survey for the second half
Before
of
the end of the year.
Understanding that whatever the outcome of the RFP, we'd be working with BCA through the Townsend Florida project essentially in 2022.
Just as a recommendation too, for the building condition survey RFP, be careful of the low numbers and the ones that want to do it for nothing kind of thing. You don't ever get much for nothing, so.
Right.
I've seen a lot of it, and it's just so they can get their foot in the door kind of thing, and,
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's that's why I like something like this to make the cut on, architects and say, what's your actual approach? Meg's done an excellent job of that with our RFPs, she's keeping all the numbers to herself.
Yeah.
We get to score it based on the value of it, and then go, okay, this is exactly what we want, and then we look at numbers and go, hey, we made it, we got one, or, it's a little bit too much for rural Walton. So,
That's-
our team, you guys handle it seamlessly, we appreciate that.
Okay, so I think I've got it.
Okay.
I guess going back to the original question of this Townsend Story project, we gonna reach out to Scott? Do you wanna have a conversation with Scott as far as getting someone here and trying to get numbers and go together to go to Townsend Story? What's the best approach?
Why don't we set up a meeting with Scott? and
Yeah,
continue
let's get the
that
team together and,
So we're in the midst of, Thursday morning, we're having a, design development estimate review with them. We have our design development estimate completed, we're in pretty decent shape budget-wise, the way we pull things out, put alternates, so we're okay there. I'm just letting them have their time now with our estimate. If they want to beat it up, they can beat it up, but that's fine. But we want to come to an agreement before we come to you. So we're planning on having that meeting with BCA, and then when we have, after that meeting, we'll be able to present the estimate. So, I think it's a separate meeting, nothing to do with anything else going on.
like we did the last time.
Yeah, just the Townsend. I can set it up if you want.
That's fine. Sure, appreciate that. So we've got the 100,000 that's been approved. So that's off, so that's out of the work. Phase 2 is heavily designed at this point in time. So moving on to discuss this is probably a good timing to get some focus on it, so.
Yeah, I can say that, I understand the difficulty that you've had, but Bill's been doing a great job. He's
We're
been-
live streaming, so we won't talk about details of personnel, just to make sure you know that.
Just his work that he's doing right now, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I know. I just don't want to get in a critical conversation about anybody or anything.
Yeah, I understand.
So, are you gonna discuss capital outlay project?
I didn't have anything else.
Oh,
We
just,
certainly can.
the question just came to my mind, if we come in at like, let's just say, 60,000, I don't know what it's gonna be. Can we, divert the final 30 or 40,000 to those PTAC units? In, those old PTAC units in the high school offices and down to like in the administration offices?
Well, capital outlay is an approved state project for that dollar amount, so.
So just for that
When you
dollar?
say divert, there's a scope.
Okay, so there's no way we.
There's no diverting outside of the scope.
Yeah, it's been submitted already and approved. It's
Done.
Both already approved.
So we'll stay with it. And then the next conversation we'll have at our next meeting is start talking about our next capital outlay as well, and as we walk through it. It's something Meg and I have been discussing it. But we won't need to get into that this evening, but that'll be something we'll bring, to the table, soon after this, so we want to start thinking about that concept. I think this was the library is the last flooring, as far as asbestos flooring. So that could be an easy shift as our next focus anyway. That was the goal, was to get all that asbestos flooring out. So that could be just the next focus after this classroom, and then that's done, right? John,
Except the auditorium.
No, it's 5
for the
more.
auditorium as well. So between those two, so I guess we have our focus really. We don't have to talk about it. We know, we have those next two targets.
Yeah.
3 upstairs and 2 downstairs still.
So,
Carpet on them.
so we'll just keep chipping away
Yeah,
at those.
I think that would be great.
Right,
Okay.
that's one thing I'd
That
like to
works.
see done.
And I think once again, I think that auditorium, I mean, that could probably fold right into the 2027 scope.
Yeah, but we look at some combinations, if we have a space that's, take a library, it might be a little bit more expensive than a classroom auditorium may fit together. We're just gonna have to get some ideas. of that, see what fits underneath 100. Hopefully, our bidding will come in better than it did last year with the flooring as we move forward, and get out of this pandemic.
And even if you had to do a classroom and part of it, so the auditorium was really set up in 3 sections.
Right.
So if you did a side with a class, I mean, you could phase that.
To maximize that amount,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the library's gonna work, because I think we decided we couldn't really do that under a hundred thousand, so.
Or we could do this,
Well, like what Kevin just suggested, we just carve it up.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
cut out like Rick's office, I think.
Right.
Put that in another.
Anything else for this evening, Mick?
I don't-
This was a great meeting. I gotta say, we got a lot of direction tonight, I think. I feel anyway. We'll push on this. We'll discuss as far as getting an assessment of those, of the 2 walkways. We'll have a discussion, as a team about that. See if we explore that, whether or not it's gonna go in capital project, or we get it done sooner under repair work. So we'll inform the committee and the board with what we discover.
So then with everything we discussed tonight, are we better off not spending any money on studying the electricity for a generator?
Still gonna need to know at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, you figure out how extensive and how costly one of those studies would be, and then we can decide whether or not to do it.
You know, I just,
We'll explore it from that angle.
so I'm
I
just
just-
saying, if we're kicking that can
No.
farther down the street, we don't need to spend that money
Well,
today.
Mike
Correct.
can tell us how much.
So,
Cost.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, was there a generator in the scope, the wording of your referendum?
Currently, for this.
Yeah.
For this one?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Any discussion about, a possible generator or anything?
Oh, in this one, no.
I don't believe so.
Not that we're doing it, I'm
No.
just saying. in
Right,
the
but it
language.
could fall underneath the fold. No, I don't believe so.
Maybe.
The only reason I'm saying is because, depending how things go with phase 2 and everything, you might be running into the capital project to do the study because you mention it within the referendum as part of possible scope that you might do.
Yeah, I don't believe so, but we can take another,
It was
Review
in a
it.
previous capital project that did not get approved, but I don't think there was any, I'm quite certain there was no reference in this project, it was not. It was never discussed as a part.
was it in as an item in the last project? Or was it in the referendum of the last project that
No,
got,
it
that got?
wasn't spelled out within the referendum.
All right, so they didn't do any exploration or design work at that point.
Did they, I don't remember the wording exactly, but did they mention electrical upgrades?
Yes. I
In
know
this
that.
one?
That might work.
And that's
Right, because there's lighting discussion, I mean, there was electrical in it because of that parking lot. There's lighting
Well, we had
issues in that parking
Full
lot.
LED upgrades.
I mean, so there is electrical
Transformers.
work in the,
So we might be able to
You're doing
fit
a lot
the
of
study
electrical
underneath it.
Upgrade and stuff, so
Yep.
you need to do a study to see how that might work.
probably,
I like the way you think.
So
Trying to make sure you don't spend money out of your general fund.
we'll have that conversation, and we'll have that study, and we'll also seek out the emergency services side, just for kicks, to see if there's any funding source anywhere. It's been a while since we've gone down that road, it's time.
Are we done?
Are we all set?
We keep putting the generator on the back burner and everything, and then what happened in, February of 2016, and do hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage to our
Yeah.
heating system, then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
I hear you.
geez, maybe we should have done,
But it's, it's also, you gotta do that
yeah.
balancing act. It wouldn't be the only building in Walton that's not, has its own energy supply.
Yeah.
But, and that's,
Yeah.
I think that's the difficult part when you're spending taxpayer dollars to balance that priority list of, I mean, safeties and,
So I
I
would,
don't think I'd throw it away. I think it definitely
Well, no,
is information worth having, but I just,
The question with the emergency services too would be, now that they've got the new facility at Masonville, at Harrow Campus, just out of Trail Creek, proximity and distance-wise, they know that that's operational. We know it may be impossible to get there,
Right.
But it'll be interesting to hear what Red Cross and what those different conversations are for emergency services. You know, I mean, we know going from here to there, you know, depending on what the emergency is.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Usually the overflow at Trout Creek itself is a minor
Right.
crossing issue.
So, but, you know, we'll have the discussions and then we'll see, we'll take it on and we'll get the analysis of wherever we can and we'll get some direction and we'll bring it back to the committee and to the board. Anything else for this evening or can Corey end this string?
I'm good.
Hearing nothing.